When I found out I was pregnant, I had heard of Roots of Empathy from friends and thought it would be great to participate. To think that our baby could help build empathy in children was thrilling. We take Leo to the same classroom every 3 weeks. The students get to see Leo grow, how he learns, how he communicates, and they see how we as parents care for him as his needs change. Leo is teaching emotional literacy. As the instructor coaches the kids to read Leo's cues, they learn that he has the same feelings as they do. They know he cries for a reason and smiles for a reason, just like they do. By learning how to understand how Leo feels, and by learning the words for those feelings, the children learn to understand themselves and each other. That's the empathy connection. Leo is our baby, but he is also their baby, and he's a great teacher. So, Mary, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
To talk about the extraordinary work that you're doing, bringing babies into classrooms and changing the culture of classrooms and teaching kids emotional literacy. Now that the organization's established is one thing, but I wonder if you could take us back to the beginning and the early sort of light bulb moment that that brought this to life.
I guess we go back to 1996, and my first social innovation had been in Toronto, and it was called Parenting and Family Literacy Centres. And the idea of those programs was to work with vulnerable families before their children started school. So parents could get the support they needed and could learn about ideal ways to engage with their children as a child's first teacher. And in doing that work, I came across a great deal of child abuse and domestic violence. And these were all families who were struggling and doing the best they could. And the people who were responsible for the abuse were not monsters. They were people who did not have empathy. And what I came to understand in this work was that the common denominator in suffering and in cruelty is the absence of empathy, with the Holocaust being the world's most best understood example of the absence of empathy. And given that we were able to improve children's school readiness scores from the lowest 10th percentile to plus 50 percentile, and given that how children start school is typically how they finish, unfortunately, the government made this program, Parenting and Family Literacy Centres, policy based on research. But I realized that we would never reach all of the children because this program was able to succeed because of the politics of the trustees in place at the moment. So don't vote. Because every level of municipal engagement affects every child in the community. So I loved that you were speaking here about children's rights. This is all about children's rights. So I started Roots of Empathy because I realized it's not enough to work with the family to support optimal development for the children, that if we really want children to be able to be personally happy and publicly useful, that they need to have empathy, that you will only break intergenerational cycles of violence and poor parenting if you cultivate empathy. So if empathy is at the core of violence and cruelty, we do know, and I guess my aha moment and what the awards came for was the appreciation that empathy is innate and that it is either fostered in that first relationship of love with the mother and the baby or the father and the baby, or it fades. And those two understandings about the genesis of empathy and the common thread in violence combined is what launched Roots of Empathy. And as a social innovation, it gave me Canada's first social entrepreneur. And more recently, top social entrepreneur, simply because what a simple idea, but the scalability of it made it a huge change maker in Canada and in other places. So in terms of how we would go about sharing this program, it was a very interesting thing because teachers talk to one another. And I decided not to have a marketing or an advertising budget, but to rather let the underground take care of it. And that if there really was an interest in having Roots of Empathy, that parents would hear about it, that teachers would talk about it, that people would ask for it. So in terms of how programs scale, I started in '96, and I was already the administrator of the first social innovation, and it didn't take me long to leave that in the capable hands of the staff who had been brought along, and to set up a not-for-profit and to find ways to share the concept. And it was amazing how quickly it happened. It scaled across Ontario, and then it scaled across Alberta and British Columbia and Prince Edward Island, and before you knew it, it was like wildfire going across Canada. I turned down all international offers, and there were many, until we were in every province of Canada. And that was a tricky thing to do. But the thing is, you as a social entrepreneur, you need to know what your goals are. And our mission, you saw there in the video, to build caring, peaceful, and civil societies by raising levels of empathy in children and adults. And I thought, let's do this at home first. And quite honestly, Canada is one of the most successful democracies on the face of the earth. If we can have a more empathic citizenry, we will have peace in the boardroom and maybe peace in the war room, because empathic children will become empathic policymakers, empathic parents, empathic teachers who won't turn a blind eye to bullying, who won't turn a blind eye to exclusion, who won't turn a blind eye to anything that goes on in the lives of children who are not in a position to defend themselves or to speak up for themselves. So we really do believe in changing the world child by child. And empathy is something that cannot be taught in the conventional way. I started out as a school teacher 100 years ago, and more or less. And the idea that teachers, you know, really, they all start teaching with only gold in their hearts and only want to make the best for children. And sometimes you're overwhelmed with the enormity of the task and the complexity of children's lives and the bureaucracy of the system, and rather than expecting school teachers to teach Roots of Empathy, I decided to give it to them as a gift, to train people who would go in with our curriculum, with a 4-day training, with a certified instructor, with mentoring, with professional development, with the very best support, to have someone in your classroom who really would understand the lives of the children, the complexity of the classroom, the importance of education. And let me say, in Canada, having come from some other countries where the purpose of education is not as clearly defined, in Canada, the purpose of education is not exclusively job training. In some countries it is. So there's no soul. There's no sense of the whole child. Children's rights are a laugh because there's no time for discussing their rights. It's what their score is. So we care more about less about the marks and more about the mark of the person. So in terms of scaling this program, we now are in 10 countries and starting in Chile, which will be 11, in multiple languages. And what we have done in every country is to do formal research with the universities so that you can prove in every instance that the time that is spent in the classroom, which is 27 lessons over the school year, is time that is useful, that is time that we can prove the impact, that it is reducing aggression, reducing bullying, and building children's social and emotional understanding. So that translates to kindness, caring, cooperation, collaboration. Collaboration is one of the top requirements for success in the workplace. Empathy is one of the top, well, it's, I would say, of all the human traits, the most important. I would say in all the traits of leadership, the most important. It's a prerequisite for successful relationships in any stage of life. Who are your friends? Are they not people who understand how you feel? Are they not people who actually give a damn? You know, the difference between a friend and a colleague in the workplace, if you have a rear ender with your car on the way to work and you mention it to people at work, most people, your colleagues, will say, oh, how unfortunate, or that's going to cost you a lot of money. A true friend would understand how you felt in that moment and would probably go to a different place. You must have been really frightened. Your husband's going to have a fit. Whatever the feeling would be of the person, rather than the external ramifications of what an incident like that you shared with your fellow workers, what it means to you. So a friend is someone who is in relationship with you, and you can only be in a meaningful relationship if you get the other person. If you understand how they feel and you have the capacity to feel with them. So you often have armchair empaths. We say to the children, and I mean the children are incredible at this, finding the humanity in the baby and learning the baby's feelings, and then of course we flip the whole experience back to them. When was a time that you felt frustrated like the baby? So you're building emotional literacy, which is the affective aspect of empathy, and the cognitive aspect is perspective taking. And in focused attention, number one of the executive functional skills, which are crucial to how we problem solve, how we deal with higher level functioning. The children in Roots of Empathy, their attention is focused on the baby. They learn to take the perspective of the baby, how they think the baby's feeling, what they think the baby's intentions are. Is the baby trying to reach that ball? Is the baby trying to turn over? What must that be like to be a beached whale? When you're 4 months old, your hands don't meet in the middle, you can't bat or grab anything, your fingers certainly don't work as a team. And it's like wearing mitts. You know, you try and turn a page while you're wearing mitts. You try and move when your boots are full of water. You know, babies have incredible frustrations and incredible perseverance. So everything that the children come to understand about the little baby is really a portal for them to understand about themselves. So when we say, you know, when did you feel frustrated like the baby? The children share openly how they felt frustrated. There is no other class in school ever where you would have the chance to say, without fear of being laughed at, that I feel frustrated when I'm always the last one to get out the door. I feel frustrated when I can never get my shoes tied up tight enough. I feel frustrated when I never know how to spell the words right. I feel frustrated when I can never get the math done. So the children are massively empathic in recognizing when their friends need help. So, you know, the children, when they speak about the negative emotions, which we never do, you have to be a Pollyanna in our culture. You're not allowed to be sad. You're not allowed to be discouraged. You're not allowed to be disappointed. You're not allowed to be afraid, and heaven forbid you should be lonely. I was sharing with Anita earlier today, there is a pandemic of loneliness in childhood. Children share with us their innermost thoughts every day, all around, in many languages, on 3 continents. I can promise you the speed at which life is going for children hasn't allowed them to have the relationships, the FaceTime that they would like to have. They have lots of screen time, which might be good fun, but they don't have as much relationship time as they used to be able to have, which means it's harder to develop empathy. because empathy is something that is caught rather than taught. So, you know, we teach in school really what we want children to know. And in Roots of Empathy, we're not interested in what they know. We are very interested in what they think, and we're very interested in what they feel, and what they think other people feel, and what they think other people think. So children learn about their own learning. They learn neuroscience, how the baby learns, and they learn metacognition, and they learn things that you don't learn anywhere else intentionally. So it gives them the most important literacy of life, emotional literacy. You know, if you don't develop emotional literacy, it's about going through life without hearing, being tone deaf, and without being able to see well. Because you don't have the skills to connect, to know all the people you could know, to feel all the emotions you could feel, to be as present in life as you would like to be. Some people show up in life every day and they're only half there. So to be able to give children this competency to know themselves, to understand themselves, and then to teach them about temperament traits. Temperament traits are the way we see the world. They're not moral judgments. And when you learn about the temperament traits of a baby, that some babies have a very positive, sunny mood, and other babies are more serious. And that's the glass half full, half empty that we speak about in adult life. But there are many babies who don't crack a smile till 6 months into the program. These are the philosopher kings. These are the babies who are more serious and reflectful. It doesn't mean they're unhappy. The babies who smile, as that little baby you saw, she makes everybody smile, and everybody loves a lover. But we should also appreciate the quiet, reflective, shy people who see a lot more than those who are out there making it happen, and whose insights often run very deep. And what happens in the Roots of Empathy classroom, the children who are the shy, serious ones are appreciated. People listen to them. We never ask a child who's put up their hand with a question or an answer. We never ask the first hand up, ever. We ask the 6th or 7th hand, and we wait. And we have lots of quiet spaces, and the children realize this is not a race to impress anyone. This is just take your time, and we'll give everyone a chance to think. And we're not going to reward the smarty pants who gets their brains and their mouth in gear faster than anyone else. So when you don't reward speed, and when you don't reward a big vocabulary, or when you don't reward eloquence, when you just thank children for their participation, or repeat what they said, rather than judging what they said with praise, because praise is a destructive reward in public, fine in private, fine at home. But if you praise one child in the classroom and say, "Oh, Anita, that was such a brilliant question," or "Anita, thank you for that insightful answer," Anita may feel happy, but everybody else feels nervous, because they know if they say something and the teacher, the Roots of Empathy instructor, doesn't reward them, they're going to feel that what they said wasn't worthy. And the adult has all the power then. So what we're saying, we're giving the child the right to contribute without any sense of judgment. Because who can judge what you think or feel? What you feel as a child is very often closer to the truth than what we feel as adults. Younger children have very pure emotions. A little baby who can't walk or talk is in an emotional soup with the mother and feels exactly what that mother feels. And that's why postpartum depression is such a dangerous thing. Because if you have a sad mom, you have a sad baby, and sad babies don't thrive. Doesn't matter how much they eat, they don't thrive. So let me stop here. I hope I've given you enough to ask questions. And Anita, maybe you want to steer.
I'm going to ask two more questions before I open it to the floor. In the MOOC, we talk about the importance of learning as a social entrepreneur. So you have an idea about how you want to make something happen. You have a theory of change that over time gets refined, you pivot. So I'm wondering if you could share some of the lessons learned that perhaps takes away the fear from having to get it right from the get-go.
Well, I've made it up, the whole thing. I'm still making it up. And I'm quite open about that. I try things all the time. Some of them are massive belly flops. And I always share the belly flops because people who have new ideas need to be fearless in trying them. And, you know, one of the things that I had to change that I was really disappointed in, when you scale, you have to be ruthless in eliminating frills so that it can be transportable. And you have to distill what are the essential elements. And one of the, for examples, was that in the concept of helping children understand that we all have a first reaction to things in life. We are either cautious or adventurous, and there's a continuum in between. So you can show this with a little baby, but all we're looking to do is to help children have self-knowledge, self-empathy, so that they can navigate their way in life and change the world for us. Thank you. So one of the very effective ways we did this was to get 4 jars of baby food and to give all the children a spoon to taste the 4 different jars of baby food. And one of them was apricots and one of them was peas. We tried not to give particularly nice things, to get the children's reaction to trying all of these things. And I mean, you get 30 little ones in a room, and we work with children from kindergarten to grade 8. And some will say, yuck, I'm not trying that, it's green. And some will valiantly try anything and everything. And some will have a reaction, well, I've never had that before, so that tells me I don't like it. It's not a familiar food. So some first reaction is, if it's not familiar, I'm not interested. Then we say to the parent, we want you to bring in a food that the baby has tried before and likes, and a food that they haven't tried and you think they won't like, so we can see the baby's first reaction. And, you know, the cautious baby will reject the new food. The children are making predictions about if they think the baby will reject or accept. And they vote. We vote on many things. We vote on the size we think the baby's going to be. It's a participatory democracy. We're going for pluralistic societies. So we have charts and we've measured how many thought this. And anyhow, so the children are really gauging this little person's reaction to the world so they can understand their own. And I do have to tell you, in this particular case, when we were still doing this, Michelle, the Lieutenant Governor at the time, had visited a class, Adrian Clarkson, and the baby was spinach, and the baby shuddered. It was a cautious first reaction. Complete body shudder, looked at the parent like, you betrayed me, and then sprayed spinach all over everyone. So, you know, the theory of change, you can't always go with, if it's working, go with it. If it's working, you can stay where you are with it, but if you want to scale it, you have to use a different set of glasses. So we stopped buying all the baby food. We still do allow the tasting of the thing. When you know, our theory of change was not to cover the universe, although we had invitations from the universe. Beijing calls every June predictably, because they have baby celebrations in June, which in Vancouver show in Beijing. There's Chinese television stations, shows in television in Beijing. Many, many countries in the world. So we thought, rather than going very broadly, we would go deep and we would learn our lessons and then go deep somewhere else and learn our lessons. The one value was we will only partner with people who we have shared purpose. So I turned down a lot of money You know, I was given €1 million if I wanted it to scale the program in a country in Europe if I would scale with the disability community. And I said, the disability community does not need empathy. It's the rest of us need it, to include them. So this very generous philanthropist, he didn't accept that. He said, well, just try it, and then we'll see. So no, I didn't take the money, and it was €1 million to start. That was not the end of it. So the theory of change, do you change the world, which we believe the children do, and our theory is that if you allow children to have deep internal transformative change, what is their ripple effect in the world? So we don't only work targeting the program to communities where there is huge disadvantage, neighborhoods or schools where there's a lot of violence, because we know we can bring the violence down. But we're also very interested in the children who are likely to be leaders. So in DC, I turned down Beauvoir School, which is a marvelous private school where all the politicians' children go. For 3 years, I turned them down because I didn't want to enter the nation's capital as a private school program. So I said to this school, if you want to form a consortium of other schools, a variety of schools, I'll be there. And didn't they do that? And aren't we there? And didn't they get the front page of the Washington Post above the fold, covering the brilliance of what they had done? So the theory of change is stick to your guns, don't be seduced by money, and that listen to the children. We have research up the yin-yang, and it's brilliant. The white coats tell the truth. Everybody respects that. We also are now doing brain-based research, which will convince all the naysayers. I mean, behavioral-based research, even though it's randomized, pre-post control study, longitudinal, best kind of research possible in conflict zones as well as in peace zones. If you have biological evidence, nobody says it doesn't work. So we're now working on the concept of self-regulation by looking at the structure and function of children's brains, 8-year-old children in Seattle, Washington, through the University of Washington, and looking longitudinally in the conflict zone of Belfast. So the theory of change has changed, if you like, since we've developed. There's a program that has been a classroom-based program is now going to morph into also working with millennials. Because I think that's you, folks. I think you're a crucial sector of the future. And I'm actually working, starting next year, in business schools with MBA students, because they're going to rock the future. And if you want MBA students to be having positive leadership in the world, they must have empathy. And it's not their fault if it wasn't cultivated. And the pressure on students these days is amazing. And we just want to be able to work with small numbers in a small number of business schools in North America. I've been invited to do this in Europe and in New Zealand and other places. And I said, no, let's just try it here. So we're ready to go with Stern School of Business in NYU and 4 universities in Canada. And the idea will be we'll train the students, 4-day training. They'll teach the program, 27 classes. They'll even make a home visit to a parent to explain to them what the program is going to be about. And they will get credit. And I am not doing it unless they get credit. Yes, in a way you will be volunteering. Why? Because you're giving yourself. You cannot do this for money. You do this selflessly, and you feel yourself change. And so many of the Roots of Empathy instructors say, I wish I had done this before I had children. Or I wish I had done this before whatever. So that is a change in how we plan to make change. I have always been asked to work in the prison system. I have worked previously, not with Roots of Empathy, but the prison system is full of people who, through no fault of their own, have not developed empathy. We're trying to break that intergenerational cycle. Because if empathy comes through the attachment relationship, if you didn't have the chance to be raised empathically through nobody's fault, everybody does the best they can in parenting, you get another shot, because in Roots of Empathy you get a chance over a full year to biologically embed the experience and have another strip in your brain of what love looks like. There's no one right way to love, there's no one right way to be a parent, but to be able to understand how a vulnerable baby feels and to have that yourself, it doesn't leave you. And it's like riding a bike. You don't really ever forget. You just get better at it the more practice you have. So we get a lot of frustration with me because you can't buy the program unless I agree that the reason you want to fund the program matches up with who we are and what we want to do. And that goes for governments. You know, we're funded by 80% by government. And everybody says, what? A social entrepreneur funded by government? Well, guess who pays for education? So it's not just education that funds us, it's ministries of justice, because they realize it's crime prevention. It's ministries of health because they say it's the best mental wellness promotion or mental illness prevention. That aggression is really the gateway to poor mental health. And if you can prove that you can reduce aggression from kindergarten on, that is a massive way to preventing poor mental health. So the plot thickens and the plan changes. You know, we met like everybody else, we make a 5-year plan and in 5 minutes it's toast. We still do it, but you need to be, I guess, in flux or in flow, where you appreciate that things are changing all the time. And you don't deny your values, but you have to be able to go a little bit with the flow to understand where the world is moving and to move with it. So we have cultural adaptations wherever we go, but the program is delivered in the same way. The training is done in the same way. In Aboriginal communities, we have a sharing table. In Aboriginal communities, we have an elder bless every training. In Aboriginal communities, we go for a walk twice a day. In Aboriginal communities, we serve protein for sure at coffee break. Because we've listened and we've learned what are the circumstances for optimal learning for Indigenous peoples who are taking our training. So we have a lot of silence in our training of Aboriginal peoples, whether it's in New Zealand or whether it's in New Mexico or whether it's in Northern Ontario. It's about being empathic. It's about being in tune. It's about how do you embrace the other without giving yourself away. And it's a great learning process. So the theory of change is in flux. We reward in education firsts, the person who gets a spelling bee and everything else. And as a child, if you're spontaneously that first child, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, but it does mean you have to shut up and listen up. That, you know, it's rude of you, and I don't mean you personally, it's rude just because you have the best singing voice or the fastest thinking or the fastest running. It's empathic of you to realize that others would like a chance, you know? So it's a very good lesson, and it's unfair if you're made to feel that the teacher doesn't like you. It's the teacher's job to realize that in an inclusive classroom, every child must have a voice. And some children's voices take longer to be heard, so give them the chance, for goodness sake. So what we do in Roots of Empathy, we have consensus building groups where the children are divided into groups not by the bluebirds and the blackbirds, which are ability groups and every child knows. We hand out laminated pictures of babies' faces. Some are crying, some are laughing. The children choose. If you're in the crying babies group, over here. If you're in the laughing babies group, over here. So there's no way the children self-select. And in those groups, we say, here's the problem. You need to come to consensus on what is the best way to diaper a baby. You know, so shoot me if I get the wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer. The exercise is how do we listen well enough to one another to come up with one answer. We never do that in life. It's the bully gets the biggest answer, right? Whoever's most forceful. We're looking for children who will not become forceful but will become pliable, who will be able to hear the other and thank you very much, have flexible thinking and maybe rejig how they thought based on other information. These are some of the attributes of executive functioning skills, which we don't teach in school, which if you don't have them, you're in trouble for decision making. So it's really up to the teacher, and because we come from a principle of intrinsic motivation, meaning that you don't speak to get all the light and the teacher think, oh, isn't she smart? You say something because you have something to say, and if you don't have anything to say, for goodness sakes, listen to other people who might have something to say. That's not how university works. It's airtime, right? It's all about airtime. And that's why sometimes what gets put out there is not well thought out. It's well spit out. And the person who's taken the time probably has a very thoughtful reflection that nobody else will benefit from, because we don't organize ourselves in a way that's respectful of everybody's ability to contribute. So you reinforce the child who's probably very thoughtful. And I'm not saying that you're not, I'm saying you're quickly thoughtful. You know? It's the tortoise and the hare. So, coming to the next question, how can you help? Was that the next question? I'm going to talk to Anita about maybe doing something special here. How long are you here for? Next year too?
A month, and then exchange, and then another semester.
We, you know, maybe in Canada we might look at some of the other faculties and give an opportunity for students to get training and to work with real children and real adults in a real classroom situation to understand the complexity of education, to understand the brilliance of children and the brilliance of babies and the ways that get, the things that get in the way of a child being successful. So my first out the door was to work with the MBA students. So we're thinking bigger. I've got a year to work it out. But in the interim, I'll give Anita my email address and
I have it on like memory dialed. Mary.
oh well, that's true. Well, I'll put a card. I've got everybody else's card but my own here, you know. There's all everybody else's. So thank you for that question. Yes, I'll be happy to fill out your card. And the question in the back, could you please restate it for folks?
When you think about physical touch.
I can tell you that physical touch has been worked into our curriculum. Physical touch has been so misunderstood. It's probably, of all the senses, the most important one to brain development. If you look at a little baby, without touch, they starve. The Romanian orphanages fed children well, they were spotless. They were cared for they were inoculated. They had everything that the physical world you would think required. But because they didn't have the nurses to hold the babies, those children, depending on how long they were there, the fallout, if they were adopted within a certain period of time, the adopted parent was able to, through touch, almost kangaroo care, was able to get an attachment, trusting relationship going. If they were adopted later on, because of the poverty of touch, they were never ever able to relate or trust. And it's a tragedy. So if you think about optimal brain development for little babies, the number one requirement is touch. Premature babies are now able to make double the gains in weight and in every aspect of development if the parents, dad and mom, or whoever, wear the baby skin to skin. We call it kangaroo care. Touch does more to heal than anything else. If you're elderly and alone and in hospice care, the touch of a hand does more to reassure and restabilize all the body systems than any medication. So Tiffany, what is her name? Tiffany, there's a wonderful neuroscientist in London who's written a book called Touch. I've lost her surname at the minute. But the best possible advancement for a little baby is breastfeeding. Now, bottle feeding, nothing wrong with it, but take off your shirt, which is what breastfeeding does, right? Because it's skin to skin. So you're just grand with bottle as long as you take off your shirt. Daddy too. Yeah. Take off your shirt. It doesn't matter if it's hairy. It's warm. You know, babies don't care. But I can tell you in terms of touch, the 5 senses wire the brain up. And when you breastfeed, you have the multiple firing and wiring of neural connections in the brain, which form pathways of resilience, of love, of all the things that make us human. So when you breastfeed, the baby can see you. Best of all, the baby feels you, because to touch is to be touched. It does something for the mother. There is a flood of oxytocin in the mother that the baby experiences. There is the scent, the touch, the wraparound of warmth, the proprioception, which is movement. So all of the senses are ignited, and that multiple firing and wiring of the neurons in the brain, touch being the best, makes us human. So it's why in Canada, quietly under the table, I advocated for a year maternity leave or paternity leave, because to be able to be present, to be able to have your baby in your arms, does more for the development of the economy of this country than any other policy. Because if you can have an empathic, fully developed human being in that first year of life, which is the most influential year in the lifespan, more is learned in that year than the rest combined. I don't care how smart you are. That year is so misunderstood. Do you know that more babies die in that year than in any other year of our lives? People don't know that. Today, what I was dealing with, I didn't tell you, before lunch, I got a call from Alberta. One of our Roots of Empathy babies died overnight. 4.5 months, perfectly healthy baby, sudden infant death syndrome. It's a tragedy. We teach in Theme 4 of Roots of Empathy, put babies to sleep on their backs. It cuts the incidence of sudden infant death syndrome by 50%. That mother had our brochure. We give every Roots of Empathy mother 5 public health messages. One we've written about postpartum depression. 15% of mothers have postpartum depression. They don't know why they're crying. They don't know why they're sad. They're ashamed. It's no shame. It's chemical. We need help. Put the baby to sleep on the back. All of these things. So we lose a lot of babies to sudden infant death syndrome. We lose many more for shaken baby syndrome. That's another one of the brochures we give out, because parents who do not know will shake a baby out of exhaustion and frustration, desperation. We had a Roots of Empathy baby in a Western province. Wonderful Roots of Empathy baby. And the family bought a home in another province. And the dad went to look at the house. and the exhaustion and isolation and desperation of a colicky baby. And what happens when you shake a baby, a very little baby, the brain bumps against the skull and there's massive hemorrhaging. And do you know that many of the little children in our country and other countries have been shaken into wheelchairs and shaken into blindness and shaken into all kinds of things that's only now being understood as shaken baby syndrome. So this whole idea of the first year of life, it's why we work with a baby in the first year of life. More development happens, our humanity develops. This is the most vulnerable person in the universe. But I've worked with people who've killed their babies, and they were not monsters. They didn't understand that babies have feelings. They thought the baby was trying to get them by crying because they'd fed the baby wasn't wet, cold, tired, hungry. What other reasons could a baby cry? Do you know that Roots of Empathy Children can write a book on why babies cry? A whole book. In fact, one of the research pieces is, how do you help a crying baby? And the children write great stories. And why would a baby cry? So they will tell you, chapter and verse. Because they're lonely. You put them to bed and they think that everybody's partying downstairs. That was a 6-year-old.
Isn't there an acronym for that? What's it called? Fear of missing out? FOMO? Baby FOMO.
Yeah. So.
Well, you know, we hug in this class, so we engage in touch, even though it's business school. 2 questions. I know we'd love to keep you here longer. If you have any advice to aspiring social entrepreneurs and future leaders in society, and then if you want to indulge the class in the story that I always ask you to share, you are welcome to do so, but no pressure.
Okay. Let me do the easy one first.
Okay.
Every time I speak to children in a classroom, you know, the teachers always do this big, oh, Mary Gordon's coming. We have her book. She made up this program. And the children, after I see the class, the children relax and settle down once we've had a bit of a chat. But before I go, I always say to the children, it doesn't matter how old they are, I say, now, have you any advice for me? And they're stunned that you want their advice. So I wait and I wait and I wait, you know, the silence bit. And then some child will say, I think you should wear high heel shoes. So I said, why high heel shoes? Because I heard on the radio that you're more important the higher your shoes are. So if you want people to understand that we're important, you should wear high heel shoes. So another child said to me, and this was in DC just recently, the child said, I think you should keep going. And I said, can you tell me more about that? Well, if you get disappointed or if you get very tired, because my teacher said you do a lot of airplanes, I think you should keep going for the children in the world. So my advice is from a 7-year-old. I think you should keep going. If you have ideas that you think are important, do not take no for an answer. It might not be perfect. None of us are perfect. But I can promise you, if it's new, it's better than what's old. Because not everything's working well in the world. And you are our hope. You know, I really feel that your stage is crucial. You know, before you go out to the workforce, never in your life, I hate to tell you this, I sound like a grandmother, which I am, but never in your life again, no matter how busy you feel you are, will you be able to focus solely on learning. Now, I know you're doing jobs, and some of you may have families and everything, but this period of your life is really a focus on developing for your future. So I would say indulge yourself as best you can and keep on going. Story, okay. All right. The oldest student, because we only go up to grade 8, that I ever met in Roots of Empathy, had failed school twice. So he was in a grade 7-8 class. So he was about a head taller than the other children. And the reason he had failed twice was when he was 4 years old. His mother was murdered in front of his eyes, domestic violence. And the poor little boy was in a series of foster care homes. He couldn't count how many. But when he had Roots of Empathy, his life was basically transformed. Now, this boy looked menacing. He had shaved his head, and this is the late 90s. We didn't shave our heads in the late 90s. And he had a ridiculous ponytail at the top of his head, and he had a tattoo at the back of his head. He would wear really tough clothes, and he wasn't violent to other people, but he was self-destructive. So he was really a loner. And the mother in the Roots of Empathy class this day was talking about how she put her baby into the snuggly, but her baby always wanted to face out, and she wanted a cuddly baby. But she respected the baby's need to face out. And in those days, we didn't have Velcro. That's how long ago it was. Velcro wasn't invented. Can you imagine?
I know. The internet.
Yeah, I told you I was old. Anyhow, so you used to have many, many strings not strings, but straps to wrap this snuggly around. So the mother said, the bell rang. And the reason we were having this discussion is to respect the rights of the baby, that a baby is a person who has likes and dislikes. Anyway, so the bell rang, and the mother said, would anybody like to try on the snuggly? And our friend put up his hand. So the kids were big and noisy, and they had backpacks, and they were getting ready to go for lunch. And he strapped it all on, and the Roots of Empathy instructor said, would you like to put the baby in the snuggly? And the mother's eyes went wide, and he said yes, and the mother acquiesced, and she gave the baby to put in the snuggly. And this boy, having heard the whole thing about the baby not cuddling, put the baby in chest to chest. That baby molded to him. Mother was amazed. He walked over to the corner of the classroom where it was quieter, and he started doing this rock, you know, the sit rock that mothers do when they're holding a baby sometimes. And he had his arms around the baby in the snuggly, and the baby was completely contented and molded, not a whimper. So the mother never broke gaze, you know, with the young fella. And he came back in a few minutes, and he took the baby out of the snuggly ever so gently, and he gave the baby back to the mom. But he said to the Roots of Empathy instructor, do you think that if no one has ever loved you, that you could still be a good father? It's a hard one.
You're a national treasure. The work you do is so amazing. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Really, Mary. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.